A lot of people seem to think that it's difficult or impossible to play older consoles on modern HD TVs for whatever reason, but fortunately that's not the case. Now, I understand that not everyone has the space or care factor to have a retro setup like mine where I'm using an older CRT TV, so I thought I'd make this basic quick tutorial on how to set up a range of different consoles which use different methods to hook up to a modern TV. We'll start off with the Atari 2600, which is old enough not to even use composite, but we'll talk about composite in due course. Anyway, if you're somewhat familiar with AV plugs used throughout the 90s and 2000s, you may be surprised to learn that the 2600 needs to be plugged into the aerial port of your TV instead, which I'll refer to from now on as a coax plug. Many consoles of the same generation plugged in the same way, and with the 2600 you'll need a cable that looks like this. On the left you have what's called RCA, which will plug into the console, and on the right you'll have the coax plug that connects into the aerial port of your TV. Luckily, coax plugs in TVs have never changed, at least in Australia anyway, so it's as simple as just plugging it in. It won't work straight away though. It's like using an aerial, you'll have to tune it in. The 2600 outputs on a specific frequency just like your favorite TV station, so once the console is plugged in and turned on, you'll have to go into your TV's analog TV station menus and do an auto tune. Once it's tuned in and assigned to a channel, you won't have to tune it again unless the presets get reset for whatever reason. Some other consoles can be plugged in by multiple methods, like the NES. If you want to use coax, there's an accessory called the Nintendo RF switch which works and plugs in much the same way. The only difference is that there's an extra female coax connection built into the box, where an aerial can also be plugged in, so you don't have to keep switching cables between that and your console all the time. A method I like for ease of use and so you don't lose your aerial port connection is by using an old VCR. You can actually tune the console into the VCR like you would with the TV, but you can plug the VCR into the TV by something like composite, which is a much more preferred and convenient way. While really old consoles like the 2600 can only be plugged in via coax, consoles that can also be plugged in by composite should be, since it's a lot easier. You've probably seen composite cables before, usually coloured yellow, red and white. The yellow is for video, while the red and white are both audio channels which combine to form stereo audio. It should be noted that these three connections are RCA and are all exactly the same on the inside as each other. The reason they're coloured differently is to aid in plugging them in, since the yellow needs to connect to yellow, and so on. Consoles like the NES have both coax and composite as options, but like I said, choosing composite is the superior option. Also, quick side note, you'll notice the NES only has a yellow plug and a red plug. This is because it doesn't output stereo audio, but instead mono, which is only one audio channel, so it only needs the one plug. The Sega Genesis or Mega Drive is exactly the same. The NES doesn't require a special cable, as it has plugs built in, so a standard double-sided composite cable will do fine. However, this is quite rare, and most other consoles don't use a standard plug on the console side, but I'll show you those in a minute. You'll notice I'm actually using a cable with red and white ends to plug the NES instead of yellow and red, but as long as the colours match on both sides, then there won't be a problem. Most modern TVs have the composite plugs built in, so it's simply a case of plugging them in and changing the TV to the right channel and you're good to go. However, some TVs don't have them built in and actually use an adapter like what's found on this Samsung TV. This doesn't matter though, as the console cable will still be plugged in the same way through the adapter. These adapters should come with the TV when purchased, although if you can't find it then you'll probably have to contact the manufacturer of the TV and order another one, since they're very tricky to find in shops. While many of the older consoles do use composite, you'll find that most won't use cables that are double-sided composite like what's found on the NES. This is because the console manufacturer uses their own plugs, usually so space can be saved on the back of the console. They come in a range of different sizes and shapes, but they're not standardized plugs. They're only used for that console or other consoles by the same manufacturer. This will mean that the cable will have to be specially bought, and since it's unlikely that the console manufacturer is still producing the cable since the console is discontinued, you'll either have to buy second-hand or from a third party, many of which can be found on sites like eBay. These may not be of the highest build quality, but you possibly won't have another choice. If your TV only has one or two sets of composite ports, but you want to plug more consoles in, then I recommend buying a switch box. I have a small tower of 3 switch boxes myself, and they're quite cheap to buy. They are found in most electronic stores and of course online. Composite is only one option though, and while the most common, there are alternatives. For one, there is component like this cable used for the Nintendo Wii. These actually produce a better picture than composite, so they're worth it if available, but not all consoles support it and not all TVs do either. Examples of consoles that do support it besides from the Wii are the Nintendo GameCube and the Sony PS2. The Sega Dreamcast can also use what's called VGA to output low-level HD video, but this requires a special conversion box, and of course your TV needs a VGA connector. There are a few other types of cables that are of the similar quality of Composite 2 and are more popular in certain areas of the world. SCART is popular in Europe and S-Video in America. Although with S-Video you have to keep in mind that the cable is video only and does not output audio. A separate cable for audio will be needed, but this may be worth it as S-Video can technically output a better picture than Composite. Now, for an important tip. On some consoles, mostly those from the 90s, if you plug them straight in and start playing, then the visuals might fill up the whole screen and output in widescreen. Why it sometimes does this, I'm not totally sure, but if you can, I highly recommend changing the aspect ratio to 4:3. This will mean that the video will output in a square, much like it would have been on the older TVs. The game will then not be stretched across the screen and fast look a lot better. You can change the aspect ratio on most modern TVs, have a look in the settings. I must only bribe you, it actually has a dedicated button on the remote to do so. While playing on a modern TV is mostly possible and pain-free, there are a few negatives. For one, light gun games will not work. The guns themselves are only designed to work on CRTs, so they will not recognize a flat screen. Also, the image is a lot softer on older TVs, which helps a lot with the lower resolution graphics of older games, meaning some games on modern TVs will be super crisp, thus showing how pixelated they really are. Lastly, it's sadly becoming a trend that some new TVs don't have composite ports at all. While it does seem a bit rare, if you're caught out there is a way around it. No doubt the TV will have a HDMI port, so you can buy a conversion box. Sadly, there are no simple cable or adapter alternatives, since the video audio signal needs to be converted from analog to digital, and there might be some input lag created in the process, but it's better than not playing Mario Party at all. So, that's all for today. Hopefully any questions you may have been answered, but feel free to ask anything in the comments section and I'll try my best to give you a decent answer. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.